President Donald Trump touting public safety as the debate around immigration enforcement continues. Non-government organization funding in Atlanta questioned, and state houses debate the Second Amendment all across the country. This is the Center Square Daily for February 2nd, 2026. It is Groundhog Day, and I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Let's now focus in on public safety as President Donald Trump, heading into a midterm election year, touting some historic numbers in public safety, saying that they're historic in numbers that haven't been collected since the beginning of their collection. Here's the president talking about crime in Mar-a-Lago on Sunday.
You put the Democrats in, you'll end up with open borders again. You'll end up with crime all over the place. We have no crime anymore. I mean, think of it. The country has the lowest crime it's had in 125 years in recorded history. The year 1900, that's a long time ago. Look, we stopped crime in our country, and the border is the best it's ever been. Thank you very much. I got to go to a wedding. Thank you.
Again, the president's busy in Florida over the weekend, but still taking questions from reporters. And when he talks about that crime rate, think about this in the context of it being an election year. And the FBI crime stats are showing a decline considerably across various categories. For violent crime trends, the FBI showing from October 2024 to September 2025, overall rates are down 9.3%, with murder down 17.7%. Rape, robbery, aggravated assault also down. When you look at the FBI crime stats from property crime trends, you see from 2024 to 2025, overall property crime trends down 12%, burglary down 14.3%, and motor vehicle theft down 24%. And again, that's according to FBI Crime Data Explorer as of January 15th, 2026. Now, keep in mind those numbers, you only have them from agencies across the country that are reporting crime, and some agencies don't comply with that reporting. So it could be taken with a grain of salt. But if you look at some of these other jurisdictions, including, for instance, in Chicago leaders there touting decreased crimes, in particular, for instance, motor vehicle crimes down significantly from just several years ago. But in Chicago, there seems to be another focus of officials. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson on Saturday, after teasing that he would sign an executive order to allow for any kind of investigation into federal agents enforcing federal immigration law, he signed that order on Saturday.
They are causing chaos and confusion. In response, the city of Chicago must respond with accountability and transparency. The ICE unnoticed executive order is a step towards justice. This executive order will make Chicago the first city in the country to set the groundwork to prosecute ICE and Border Patrol agents for criminal misconduct.
Johnson joining the chorus of other local officials across the country in so-called migrant sanctuary jurisdictions, pushing back against the Trump administration enforcing federal immigration law. Now, Republicans say Trump is just merely enforcing the law, and that's what he got elected to do. But these local jurisdictions having various ordinances in place, or even in Illinois' case, state law that prohibits local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. So these migrant sanctuary policies getting into the enforcement of immigration law. Now, how this all works with public safety, clearly you see social media, video being shared of protesters clashing with police, protesters clashing with ICE, protesters clashing with even local police in some instances, and the police-involved shootings that have happened. And that's led to calls for accountability of immigration and customs enforcement, even in the halls of Congress. Here's a headline from the Center Square. Senate passes funding deal and sends to House for final approval. And as you'll read at thecentersquare.com, it's a package of bills. One of them deals with the Department of Homeland Security and just exactly how they're going to possibly bring about accountability in that debate in Congress. You have members of the Democratic Party and some Republicans pushing for some oversight of ICE. For instance, saying that ICE can't have masks, or saying they have to wear body cameras, or saying that they have to get a judicial warrant instead of an administrative judge warrant on deportation or detention orders. So a lot of these various demands that Democrats are making, it could hold up funding for the Department of Homeland Security and all of the money they use for disaster relief and other programs. Now, when this is going to be resolved, it's a big question, as the Trump administration says they are not backing down from their mission on enforcing federal immigration law. They estimate that there have been 2.2 million self-deportations, 675,000 deportations, and altogether about 3 million people just in the past year going through immigration and customs enforcement various protocols in dealing with their immigration status. All of this obviously is a big issue for the president as he grapples with what Congress will do. But the president was asked about the demands that Democrats are putting on ICE, saying that it's going to be talked about.
It's not appropriate yet. We have to let a little time go by, but we'll talk about it. But we want. I got elected for law enforcement, for the border, for the economy. Things I've done a great job with. I mean, when you have the lowest crime rate in the history of our country, recorded in 125 years, to be exact. So I fulfilled so much. We'll have to talk about that over the next 3 or 4 days.
Over the next 3 or 4 days, members of Congress definitely talking about it as they have a partial government funding lapse, and how this issue gets resolved. We'll see it play out in the weeks ahead. Again, this is the Center Square Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Now let's turn to Johnny Edwards from the Center Square's investigative unit and his latest investigation, and how much money of your tax dollars go from the federal government to a local jurisdiction like Atlanta, and where do those dollars end up going? And now let's take our attention to our investigative unit, where investigative reporter Johnny Edwards joins us for the Center Square Daily. Johnny, we're taking a look at your investigation into how federal tax dollars going to the city of Atlanta are being used in some instances with non-government organizations. You burned up some shoe leather investigating this. Tell us about it.
Well, just looking through some payment records with the city of Atlanta, I found payments going to a group called the Inner City Muslim Action Network. And looking into that, that's a nonprofit based in Chicago that's involved in things like social justice and wellness programs and housing for former inmates and things like that. And looking into it, I found this was money that was to pay for unhoused, undocumented, unauthorized migrants that were pouring through the border at the time. These payments came in mostly in 2024. Another interesting aspect to this was at the same time Atlanta was paying ultimately $250,000 to this NGO. This group was staging a benefit concert for Gaza, that was to benefit a nonprofit called Amira, which has been flagged by Israeli groups for allegedly collaborating with Hamas. So a lot going on here and a lot of questions about how taxpayer dollars are being used.
There's a lot of non-government organizations out there that get tax dollars to do all kinds of work, helping with the safety nets, helping to provide food or tutoring or a variety of other issues. But there seems to be some concern across the country, Johnny, not just in Georgia and in Atlanta with your story, but the prospect that politics could be conducted using tax dollars. Do you feel that might be at play here at all, or how are these dollars ultimately being used?
Well, this raises a tremendous amount of questions about the cost of the open border problem during the latter part of the Biden administration. I mean, not only was the border practically wide open, but billions of dollars were being poured into taking care of these people coming through. Ultimately, the programs I tracked that this Atlanta money was part of totaled about $1.72 billion. That's two different programs combined. And that, of course, filtered down to local governments, which were overwhelmed with these populations, trying to keep them off the streets, one of them being Atlanta. I've tracked about 11.75 million in this money that went to Atlanta. And as the Center Square has reported, 1.72 billion is not all of it. There's Senator Rand Paul is trying to do something about $5 to $6 billion that's in all kinds of other programs for unauthorized migrants, things like SNAP benefits, TANF, Section 8, all that sort of thing. So it's the tremendous cost of what the policies of the last administration created. And then you look at the policies of this administration. The one big beautiful bill earmarked something like 170 billion for stepping up ICE and building a border wall. So it's kind of a bit of a whiplash between two different policies, two different ideologies.
And obviously, it's a lot of dollars on the federal level, on the nationwide level. We're talking billions upon billions, not just to, it's already been paid for non-citizens and various social services, but as you mentioned, with the enforcement aspect of going after those certain non-citizens, especially if they have criminal records. Johnny, a big number when it comes to the nationwide picture, but you're looking at Atlanta, right? I mean, this I think really kind of shows just how much work it takes to follow the money, the tax dollars involved here. It wasn't just this one group you talked about. You found funding lines for a variety of non-government organizations. Tell us about the Hispanic Alliance and Espiritus and several others.
Well, those were other beneficiaries of this money. Like I said, a total of 11.75 billion or million rather that I've been able to track coming through Atlanta. And there were city council resolutions that gave this money to 10 different groups, and Inner City Muslim Action Network being one of them. The Latin American Association, Hispanic Alliance, International Rescue Committee was another beneficiary. Now, the next step in this, not only to see where the money went and what it was for, what did they do with it? I'm trying to get hold of documents to see, did they turn in receipts? Did they turn in invoices or payment requests? Right now, I'm being kind of priced out of getting those records, which is something that frequently happens in investigative reporting. I'm trying to negotiate for them. Interestingly, the city councilwoman who put forward the resolutions that funded all these groups with this money told me last week that she was going to look into this and see if she could find out. For one question was, did any of the money that went to the Inner City Muslim Action Network end up going to this benefit concert for Gaza? I've not yet heard back from her. I'm still trying to reach her. So, if she's listening, please give me a call.
Obviously, there's a lot more questions to all of this with various state houses across the country having audits and trying to follow the money, but sometimes those audits don't really produce those receipts, and it could lead to adverse audit opinions. And even qualified audit opinions. This particular program, though, Johnny, clearly, it's something that people were hoping for, but you can see how the waste and the fraud with this much money and the lack of oversight, that's where you step in, right, with the investigative unit to look at these things. How do you feel that this could be extrapolated in other major metropolitan areas outside of Atlanta across the country?
Well, it can be done anywhere. I mean, this money poured to communities, local governments, NGOs, contractors all over the country. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to look at Minneapolis, like what they did with their money. One question I have about this is not just how did they spend the money, how did they justify the money, but what happened to the clients? I mean, I spoke to one advocate for the story who made a very good point. The people that this money went to fund are now the same, or much of the same population now being asked to get out, to self-deport or to be detained and deported. So, what was that money for? Well, it was for people that had no path to citizenship, and it was almost just to kick the can down the road. You could look at it that way.
Johnny, as I mentioned earlier, you burned up quite a bit of shoe leather here, right? It's not just a matter of emailing FOIA requests in and following up on those. You actually hit the streets and tried to get some comment from some of these organizations that received taxpayer dollars.
Right. Well, I tried to reach all of them, and my phone line is still open to any of them that want to talk to me and explain this to me. But I went to a lot of effort to try and get in contact with the Inner City Muslim Action Network. Now, while they're based in Chicago, they do have an Atlanta branch. They have a 10-unit apartment building down south of Interstate 20 that's one of its uses is to house former state prisoners. But I went there, and there's an office there, and I was trying to speak to them. Incidentally, the Chicago office had referred me to the Atlanta branch, and I had already tried to reach them. So I went there, knocked on the door. The sign on the door said administration and communications, thought this was the right place, knocked on the door. Someone from behind the door wouldn't open it, but took my message. Never heard back from them. I've emailed them written questions. For whatever reason, they're just not wanting to answer these questions I have, which again are, how did you spend the money? What was the justification for it? And what happened to your clients after the money dried up?
And no luck in getting that comment. And again, you keep your phone line open for some kind of response to follow the money on this story. What lessons do you think are learned here in your reporting? Is it the importance of making sure that we do follow that money? Is the importance of local governments stepping up and doing more audits and more accountability for these tax dollars? Are you seeing some holes in that accountability?
Well, all of that, as well as just the danger of giving money to nonprofits and NGOs without some kind of safeguards or oversight. We don't know if that money might have gone to other things they were involved with. Did part of Atlanta's money go to this benefit concert for Gaza, which went to another nonprofit which has been flagged by Israelis for working with Hamas? And just also just the sheer amount of money that's gone to this problem. I mean, that's our tax money. It's very difficult to track it. Once the money is spent and out the door, I mean, it's taking me weeks to try and figure out what was the justification for this? What did it do? Why is this a taxpayer interest? We all remember what happened during the pandemic with the PPP program. I mean, most infamously, I mean, there was just so much fraud in that because there was so little safeguards. I mean, my understanding is that there was not a whole lot of safeguards in these programs either. So I'm still digging into it. It remains to be seen what we're going to come up with.
Johnny Edwards, investigative reporter for the Center Square. Greatly appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks, Greg.
Now let's take a look at quick clips from across the country with the focus on debating the Second Amendment. In Washington state, you have legislators there discussing House Bill 2235. And this is State's Representative Jim Walsh talking about the importance of privacy for those who want to conceal carry.
It protects the privacy of people who will be applying for the permit to purchase a firearm, which is still in process, but looking forward to when this is the law and in practice. It'll protect people's personal information when they apply to get a permit to purchase a firearm. I'm encouraged by the amount of support it's gotten and hope it will carry along.
Across the country in New Hampshire, you have State Representative Donald McFarland talking about the importance of reaffirming Second Amendment rights against any possible encroachment from federal officials that may want to lump certain people into certain categories to prohibit their rights.
But I ask you all to consider this narrowly and carefully. If the federal government can selectively deny a natural right to one peaceful class of our citizens today, what would prevent it from doing so tomorrow to another of those rights?
So New Hampshire clearly looking to reaffirm those rights, and legislators debating that issue. In Maryland, the Judiciary Committee in the House discussed House Bill 83, which would impact so-called red flag laws.
Under current law, there are just too many gaps that fail to ensure individuals subject to protective orders and do not continue to pose a threat to their victims. As we know, in 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed in United States versus Rahimi that, and I quote, an individual found by a court to pose a credible threat to the physical safety of another may be temporarily disarmed consistent with the Second Amendment.
Now, in other states, they may be discussing red flag laws, but there's still ongoing debates about that 2024 U.S. Supreme Court ruling in the question of somebody who is the subject of a domestic order of protection. Do they have a hearing to face those allegations, and can their individual rights be taken away in the absence of that hearing? Again, a controversial issue being debated in state houses across the country. Meanwhile, down in Kentucky, a little bit of activity discussing school resource officers that are armed, and some notes being made in Kentucky that there's about 80 armed school resource officers in that state. But in Utah, you have legislators that are proposing to get rid of some of the duplication when it comes to background checks for firearm purchases.
So what this bill essentially does is make background checks for buying a firearm no longer required in the state of Utah. Just kidding. I wanted to see some of my colleagues' faces. But from a high-level overview, we collect some data when there's a firearm purchased. Right now, there is a requirement that BCI creates a form and produces it, but we're already collecting the data in other ways. So we're just trying to eliminate some extra steps that aren't necessary.
And that is your quick clips from across the country here with the Center Square Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Join us Tuesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from around the country, only with the Center Square Daily.